Welcome everyone, my name is Henri and I'm the coordinating chaplain here with Multifaith Services. Also a minister in the United Church of Canada, and I also sit on the board of the Victoria Multifaith Society. And I welcome you here to this space, to this beautiful chapel. It definitely is a multi-faith chapel. Just have to imagine a moment for what happens in this space on a given week. Buddhist meditation happens here on Tuesday evenings. We have a Muslim Friday prayer happening here Friday afternoons. We have the Baha'i community gather for small groups. We have the spiritual and not religious, and those people who are not necessarily connected to any religious tradition, but they come here for spiritual practice. And we have a number of meditation groups and community circles, including drumming circles, where people find ways to express their spirituality and do that in this space. We have Catholic Mass, we have a number of Christian gatherings as well. We have a Unitarian group. We have so many things going on in this space. This truly is a multi-faith space. And we're gathering here today with this meeting of the Victoria Multifaith Society, and how appropriate it is that we're meeting in this place together. And one power, one love. Those words just go right to the heart. And hopefully as we talk with one another today, we'll be able to share in some of that one power, one love, that profound dignity that we share with one another. It is also my privilege to invite our keynote speaker and to welcome him to this space. John Burroughs sits on the Victoria Multifaith Society. Just recently joined us, and it's been my delight to be working and talking with you, and I am so impressed by his insight, a huge scope of wisdom that he brings, the story that he tells that help us identify what the current issues are, but the stories that he tells from his Indigenous heritage, and that allow us then to illuminate more clearly what we need to be addressing in this present moment together. He brings tremendous gifts in that regard. He's also the Canadian Research Chair in Indigenous Law here at the University of Victoria. And he's got a long string of publications around Indigenous relationships and law. He's got a number of publications that have won awards over the years. He is involved in so many groups in the community where he is bringing that connection from his Indigenous worldview with the worldview of others in the community, and trying to find ways to build on this common practice of reconciliation that we're all participating in one way or another. And he's going to be speaking today on spirituality, justice, and Indigenous peoples. And this is what is described of his talk. Indigenous spiritualities are diverse, dynamic, and innovative. They are increasingly at the heart of Canadian debates about justice, reconciliation, and identity. They appear in discussions about residential schools and overrepresentation in child welfare and prison systems. Indigenous spiritualities animate discussions about land claims, treaties, natural resource and environmental policies, as well as movements such as Idle No More and calls to take action related to missing and murdered Indigenous women and children. This talk will discuss how Indigenous spiritualities form an important part of our lives and landscape in Canada. So will you join me in welcoming John Burroughs.
Well, it is a delight to be with you today, and I'm appreciative of your coming here, and I'm delighted in that beautiful song that we heard that touched me deeply. I'm grateful to be able to talk about this issue of spirituality and justice and direct my remarks to Indigenous peoples and justice as it relates to the environment. When Europeans first arrived in Ontario, the homeland of the Anishinaabe peoples of which I'm a part, they were told that the natural features in the surrounding landscape could communicate. That is, messages could be received through observation and then offering a reciprocal response. For these reasons, Anishinaabe people put down pinches of tobacco at waterfalls. They sang as the sun rose, greeted clan animals when they appeared. They drummed when the full moon rose. They feasted at particular seasons. They smoked pipes to precede actions. They sought out turtles and shaking tents. And they performed numerous other ceremonies to acknowledge and further transmit what they learned from the natural environment. The world was and is living and was continually being reanimated as human and non-human life cooperated and struggled against one another in ongoing cycles of life and death. Stories, language, clothing, customs, laws, land-based teachings reinforced and tried to capture these views in relationship to the land, particularly around the areas that we would now call Ontario. Donald Smith, one of the historians that has studied this region, talks about, quote, the Mississauga believed that any remarkable physical feature on the landscape contained particularly powerful spirits. An unusual rock by a riverside, a strangely twisted tree, waterfall, or an unusually fast river possessed spirit power. Evidence of powerful spirits surrounded the Mississauga. At the head of the lake, the Indians frequently heard sounds like explosions of the shooting of a great gun. The elders told Sacred Feathers, one of the characters that this historian is writing about, that the spirits living in escarpment caverns immediately west of Burlington Bay caused the volleys by breathing and blowing. The deep sounds of the spirit of the Falls of Niagara could be heard at times for 60 kilometers away, shaking the air and the earth itself. At the Credit River, the Indians often heard the water spirit, who lived at the foot of a high hill in a deep hole 3 kilometers from the river's mouth. They heard him singing and beating a drum. End quote. Many of these spirits went quiet when European settlers moved to Toronto in greater numbers. These descriptions of Anishinaabe views of the natural world strongly correlate with what I heard from my grandmother, grandfather, mother, aunts, uncles, and other elders when I was a young boy at Neashi-Winigaming, which is the Chippewa-Nawash Indian Reserve on the southern shores of Georgian Bay on the Saugeen Peninsula, about 3 hours north of Toronto. I also heard these experiences from other people which reinforce these views. That is, the description of our relationship with the natural environment could have easily been given by those living at home today as what this historian indicated. We did not worship the land or these spirits, though many did praise and honor them as a representation of the Great Spirit, the creator of this land. You know that Indigenous spiritualities are dynamic and diverse and innovative. And as mentioned, they are increasingly at the heart of many debates which animate our society. I had the pleasure of a year ago working with the Wisanish people and doing a field school here on the peninsula. And to learn about their relationship to this territory would also see the world as living and in relationship with us as humans. We talk about the islands that surround us as their ancestors, the ancestors of the deep. The bear and the deer and the cedar all have personality and all have things that they can teach us. Algonquian people and Indigenous peoples across North America make these points. We see the natural world as creating and participating in the social and political conditions which ultimately structure human affairs. That is, governance and law must ultimately be derivative of and dependent on the earth and the natural surroundings we find ourselves in. But as we look around us, we see these governance systems are negatively affecting the climate, and they are doing so on a global basis. I believe we can look to our own communities, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, religious and other traditions, to find alternatives to the current paths of climate destruction that we see around us. Anishinaabe spirituality is not generally closed to other religious traditions, and I'm grateful for the beauty of other religions and what they teach me about the world. For example, this past year I've been studying the Quran in translation. I love its beauty and its complexity. I have been inspired by its words. Islam has given me new insights about how to relate to my own traditions. And it's been one of the highlights of my year reading from its pages. And from those pages I also learn a lot about from the beyond human world and the signs that are revealed. The following verse and then some commentary in the particular edition that I'm reading are illustrative of some of these discoveries that I'm finding. Quote, "There is no creature that crawls upon the earth, nor bird that flies upon its wings, but that they are in communities, like yourselves. We have neglected nothing in the book, and they shall be gathered unto their Lord in the end." End quote from the Quran, and then the commentary. It cannot be assumed that humans alone enjoy the right to ethical treatment and consideration in his religion. I cherish this idea that animals deserve ethical treatment. They are organized in communities that deserve respect. This idea reminds me of many Anishinaabe teachings that regard animals, such as the hoof nation, fish nation, winged nation, as having social, spiritual, and political communities. In fact, we have treaties with these different orders of creation. I've also enjoyed sacred scriptures from other traditions, which deepen my appreciation of the natural world. Approximately 10 years ago, I read the Etz Hayim, or Tree of Life. This is the Torah and its commentary that was published by a conservative Jewish movement, and this is profound. Familiar passages enlivened my understanding of the environment and the world around us. As I read Genesis 1:22, it says, "God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and increase, fill the waters in the seas, and let the birds increase on the earth." In this era of collapsing bird population and sea life, we see the wisdom of this command. And then the commentary in the Torah: the birth of any living creature is an instance of God's continuing creative power. The idea that the environment is continually being remade resonates deeply within me. There's much in the Torah, including its devotional materials that surround it, that can speak to what humans can learn from animals. I take from another of these commentaries. Although humans have some advantages over animals, you can still learn from animals. They have no worries or anxieties about the future. When you see a bird, a cat, dog, or bee, tell yourself, let me learn from that creature to live in the present. Learn from these beasts and free yourself from the needless thoughts about the future. They go on. It may seem a bit humiliating to have to learn from an animal or an insect, but it's even more humiliating not to learn from them. End quote. I'm grateful for what I learn about the earth from Jewish tradition, which helps me examine my ideas in a very different context. Christianity also has beautiful teachings about the world. Many of Jesus' most profound teachings use analogies to nature to encourage us to follow him, in teaching us to place spiritual concerns above temporal ones. He taught us to consider the lilies of the field, how they toil not, neither do they spin. Yet Solomon, in all his glory, was not arrayed like unto these. He compares faith to a mustard seed, the kingdom of heaven to a tree, and wayward souls to lost sheep. In the Old Testament, in Psalms, the writer hears God's voice in and over the water, wind, trees, thunder, and lightning. We are counseled to find peace in the knowledge that God's presence is found in the environment. The prophet Isaiah in chapter 42 notes that the coastlines wait for his teachings. It sounds like something an Anishinaabe elder might say. That is, the water's edge is a powerful place to be receptive to animate life. Water also plays prominent roles in John, Acts 10, and Matthew 3, as it recalls Jesus' entry into a river at the beginning of his ministry as a symbol for his followers to cleanse themselves as they prepare to help others. I've also savored experiences from other religious texts which affect my views about the living earth. Buddhism has some brilliant teachings about the nature of fire, water, plants, animals, and other living beings. And reading into the various strands of these scriptures has calmed storms within me. In particular, I have developed an affinity for Buddhist teachings of ahimsa, which are also found in Hinduism and Jainism. The idea of non-injury, of non-killing, is not an Anishinaabe teaching. But nevertheless, I wish that we as Anishinaabe, along with all humanity, would see the wisdom in not harming living creatures in our thoughts and in our words and deeds. I would like to learn more about how to harmonize these views with how I relate to the broader world. Life's precious nature is embodied in many Buddhist teachings. I particularly like the story about the blind turtle. Since Anishinaabe people often talk about our creation on the back of a turtle, on Turtle Island, I feel a connection to this teaching, which is imagine the world is covered with water as far as you could see in every different direction. And on the top of this water is a little wooden yoke with a hole in it. And the winds and the waves and the currents blow this wooden hole, this yoke, from place to place as it drifts north, south, east, and west. Now suppose under the water is a giant turtle. And once every 100 years, this turtle rises from the depths and it puts its head through this ring and it takes a breath as it faces in the sun and lives for that moment before disappearing again to the depths of that mystery below. This story deepens my appreciation for this precious moment of life. We were all somehow conspiring together, that is, drawing breath together in the mystery and the marvel of this moment of wonder that we are enjoying here. This teaching shows me the precarious and precious nature of our existence. It is astonishing that we're alive at this moment. With wonder, we share this experience with more than human beings. As I study other faiths, I find place for sustaining conditions that would help us to see law and governance differently, to see our earth as living. My other deep religious commitment is as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This tradition, this religion also makes the point that the earth is living, that it has a personality, and is distraught by how we govern our lives and how we live them. In one of our scriptures called the Book of Moses, in the 7th chapter and 48th and 49th verse, we hear the ancient prophet Enoch's prayer, quote, "And it came to pass that Enoch looked upon the earth, and he heard a voice from the bowels of the earth saying, Woe, woe is me, the mother of men. I am pained, I am weary, because of the wickedness of my children. When shall I rest and be cleansed from the filthiness which has gone forth out of me? When will my Creator sanctify me, that I may rest, and righteousness for a season abide upon my face? And when Enoch heard the earth moan, he wept, and cried unto the Lord, saying, O Lord, wilt thou not have compassion upon the earth?" End quote. Now I understand that for some people, they may regard these views as superstition, old-fashioned and quaint. But let me say that my spirituality is also inclusive of evolution. Evolution conveys an essential fact about the nature of our physical existence. It's solidly rooted in the study of the earth, and I hold it in the highest regard. Proof of evolution through natural selection is vast, varied, and magnificent. Natural selection is an earthbound fact. And this reality should have significant implications for spiritual and religious communities, because it recognizes that humans are in a kinship-like relationship with the rest of the natural world. We share a common ancestry, and our DNA and our ecologies are inseparable. The lessons from the human fossil record, combined with more recent discoveries in human genetics, confirms that we are built on the same processes that transformed every form of life over a few billion years. Understanding evolution helps me understand Anishinaabe life views, because the record that's written into the earth is written into our very bodies, and it tells us that we are all related. As Anishinaabe people, we would say, Nindinawe Maganidok. Understanding evolution as one of life's genesis through natural selection is important to my spiritual views. The point I'm making today is that many schools of thought and practice can enhance our respect for the life forces found in the natural environment. For many Indigenous peoples, reconciliation with one another requires our collective reconciliation with the earth. Practices of resurgence, partnerships of reconciliation must sustain the living earth and are more than human relatives for future generations. And we must recognize this is a two-way street, a relationship of reciprocity. As Pope Francis has said, such an approach, quote, must always become a social approach. And it must integrate questions of justice in debates about the environment, so as to hear both the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. We cannot, he says, presume to heal our relationships with nature and the environment without healing all fundamental human relationships. I'm grateful for the beauty that surrounds us and the opportunity that we have to learn from one another and from this beauty that surrounds us. My hope is that we could all find within our own spiritual, religious, and other spiritual and religious commitments, ways to honor and sustain the earth. Miigwech Vizinuig Mi'u Aha. Thank you.